Hello artists and welcome to Watercolor Level F. This is the very last level. This is super exciting, guys. Alright, let's get started. Let's see what our goals are for today. So here on my levels sheet I can add shadows and paintings. I can successfully paint in layers from the least detail to the most. I can successfully paint my painting. And I can have crisp colors in the foreground and grayed out colors in the background. All right, so you can either continue working on your mini art from level E, or you can get a new piece of paper from the level F bucket here, and you can go ahead and do it again. You will want, if you are going to do it again, you are going to want to plan it out in your sketchbook first. You are going to be taping this into your sketchbook. In the level F bucket, here we're going to move this out of the way, we have lots of different kinds of brushes in here, some small, some big. I got some really tiny ones for my really tiny details. And then I also have these pencils in here. These are watercolored pencils. I know this because I see the watercolor symbol, the brush right there. And these are going to be really cool for adding super neat details. All right, let's see what this looks like. So adding in my shadows to my paintings. Right now, there's not a lot of shadows in my painting here. How I'm going to do that is shadows are a color or a tone of that color. So remember, a tone is when you add a color to gray. And I'm going to do that in spots where the sun is not hitting my object. So if my sun is coming this way, like maybe up here in the sky where we can't really see it, then the top of my snake here is going to have parts where it has tints in it with little bits of white in it, and the bottom side of it is going to be where those shadows are. So let's take a look at what that looks like. First off, I'm going to add in some details here with just some green watercolor. I have my watercolor palette here, and I'm just adding in a darker green. When I'm adding a darker color on top of a lighter color in a layer, in watercolor this is called glazing. This is how I'm adding layers on top of layers. So I'm going to go ahead and get this darker color in here on the underside of my snake here. I'm doing just a very, very thin line, maybe around the water here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go back to my lighter color, because right now this is a very harsh line. I want to blend it out a bit. I don't want that harsh line. It doesn't look very real to me. So I'm going to go back to that light green I started with. And when I put the lighter color over the darker color, again, I'm layering my paint. This is called glazing. I'm layering my paint with a lighter color over my darker color, called glazing. Now I'm getting some crisper colors as I'm moving forward. Maybe my shadows are a bit crisper. And my back here, in the way back, one of my checklist items was that I have grayed out colors in the background. So my colors might not be as crisp. I can do this by watering down my color a bit, or adding gray to my color, my toned down colors. All right, now let's talk about that highlight or the area where the sun is hitting the top of something, causing it to look lighter, I'm going to do this by getting a light color. I'm going to go ahead and make a tone of it. So I'm going to take my green here that I've been using. I'm going to go ahead and put it in that's a little glary on the camera. Let's see if we can clear that up. That's a little better. I'm going to go ahead and get that green. I'm going to put that into my mixing tray, my mixing palette up top. Remember, I'm going to wash out my brush when I'm mixing colors. And then I'm going to go ahead and grab a little bit of white. Here, get this all activated. There we go. And go ahead and grab a little white, and I'm going to put it off to the side here. And then I'm actually going to grab just a little bit of yellow too to create some interesting colors, a very light color of this green. So now I'm going to take my green, my yellow, and my white and kind of put it all together till I get a color that looks lighter than this green here. That's looking pretty good. I like that one. All right, once I have that, then I'm going to go ahead. I might not see it very much at first because it is a lighter color. Sometimes our glazings is just really, really light. And I'm going to get that added in so that it's there and ready to go when I'm ready to add in my details. All right, there's that. All right, some of the shadows, I do this for the rest of my snake, and you can kind of see here, this part here doesn't look very three-dimensional. He looks very 2D right now, whereas these parts of my snake, they're starting to really look like they're coming out of the water just by that little bit of shadow and that little bit of highlight. All right, what I could also do is add a shadow to my water. If the sun's hitting the snake from this area, the top's gonna have a highlight, the bottom of it's gonna have a shadow, and so is the water. So to create that tone of that blue, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna grab some of that black. I'm gonna get it up there in my mixing palette. I'm gonna grab some of my blue, get it up there in my mixing palette. And then remember, it is a gray out tone. It's a tone. I need a gray, so I need white to make gray. White, black makes gray with a little bit of that blue is gonna make my beautiful tone here. There it is. All right, then once I have my tone put in, I'm gonna make sure that this is dry first before I add in that shadow. And I'm gonna add in that shadow just right here. I'm gonna be intentional with how I put it in. It follows his body. There we go. I'm just gonna put those right underneath of him so that it kind of looks like, oh, look, he's like popping out. We can kind of see where he's popping out. It makes it look much more realistic. All right, for details, let's talk about some of these details. Oh no. Let's talk about some of these details. When my watercolor is mostly dry, I can start to add in some of my details with watercolor pencils and then different types of brush strokes. So one of the brush strokes I want to show you here is a textured brush stroke where I can add other colors on top of colors to make interesting layers. There's going to be more detail closer to me and less detail farther away. So my water up here in the very front, I might be able to see like some of the waves or the sloshing around of water. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab some of this blue, and I'm actually going to make a lighter blue. I'm going to make a tone of my blue, a sky blue. I'm just going to take that and a little bit of white here. Oop, I didn't wash out my brush all the way. There we go. I can just scoop it on out if I have that happen. And I am going to go ahead and get those mixed up by creating this beautiful light blue here. I can add little bits of blue to it at a time. I don't have to go crazy. All right, now I'm going to go ahead, and this is dry on bottom, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add in some of these very light areas. I'm just doing a dabble in here. I'm doing a dabble in here, and it's going to create this texture that's going to kind of maybe look like water. But I'm just adding my layer in, my glaze on top with just a very light thing, and it's going to kind of fade out as I go backwards. It's going to fade out as I go backwards. Maybe towards the front, maybe I add in just mostly white in here so we can really get those lovely details. As I go back in space, I won't see those details as much. Let's see if we can get a really close view. You can kind of see it on top, just very slightly. All right, other details I can use are my watercolor pencils. If I'm doing, I think I want to add some texture to my snake here. This part's not quite dry, so I'm going to focus on another part that is dry because these will work best when you start on a dry area. Otherwise, your color will bleed everywhere. So we're going to pretend like I added in my shadow and highlight to this part of my snake and that it's completely dry. Now I can go in with my watercolor pencil, and it's just like a regular pencil, and I can start to add in some of these fun details. Maybe it's a pattern. Maybe I start adding in like little lines for his scales. As I go back in space though, all the way back here with his tail, I won't see any of those details anymore. So I'm not going to add any of those through here. I'm just going to add it to the very front parts so that he starts to really pop. Once I have those details in with my watercolor pencils, then I can activate the watercolors, and I'm going to add in his little tongue here. He's sniffing for something to eat. Then I can go ahead and activate those by just getting a little bit of water on my brush and then just going right over the line. I want to be very careful. I don't want too much water. Little bits of water at first, and that will activate those colors, make them blend in, but the lines will stay intact. They won't bleed everywhere if I use the right amount of water. Just like that. And then I would go ahead and add in more and more details to start to make my watercolor painting look really, really three-dimensional and adding lots of detail and interest. Happy creating!